You are listening to the Speak Podcast,
the podcast featuring talks from Speak, a public speaking platform for people with ideas and stories.
Produced by Launchpad 516 Studios. Welcome to the Speak Podcast, produced by Launchpad 516 Studios. New episodes available every week on all your favorite podcast platforms.
Speak is a public speaking platform for people with ideas and stories. Each Speak Talk features three key moments: the moment of truth, the moment of transformation, and the moment of impact.
We host pop-up events all over the world, and now we are bringing our talks to your device. Our speakers are stepping onto the stage and into the spotlight, and now onto this podcast.
Welcome to the show.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Speak Podcast. It is season 2, episode 2, and we are so excited to have you. I'm your host for today's episode, George Andriopoulos, the architect and one of the co-leaders here at Speak. Episode 1 of this season featured an episode of the Speak Podcast Live, where we did a one-on-one interview with past published speaker Rob Esposito, which was such an incredible interview. Please make sure to check that out. But today we get back to one of our normal episodes where we are featuring 3 incredible talks that come together over one micro theme. And today's theme is interconnected women. As a public speaking platform, we have so many incredible women that come across our stage. And it's a funny thing because although these talks and these themes are so different, there is a connection between a lot of the women's stories that come across our stage on a very meta level. And we're going to kick this episode off featuring women from 3 of our events: Speak Shelter, Speak Neurodiversity, and Speak Faith. So let's get this party started with our first talk. Our first talk kicks off today with a very somber note. As I sit here today recording this, the wildfires in Los Angeles are ravaging the entire community, and Speak and our entire organization send our wishes and prayers to everybody who has been affected by these wildfires. Our first speaker today, Valerie Chan, comes to us from our Speak Shelter event, which took place in New York City on October 25th, 2023. I've been lucky enough to work with Valerie twice. Once when I executive produced a talk of hers on another platform stage, and here again for Speak Shelter, which was produced by Meredith Grundy. Unfortunately, Valerie was affected by the wildfires in Los Angeles, and we send all our love to Valerie Chan, who is a valued member of our Speak community and an incredible published speaker. This particular talk, Tiger Parenting Helped Me Overcome the Shame of Real Estate Fraud, is a talk where Valerie actually speaks about her home. And so I thought it would be very special to put out this talk right now in this particular moment. In this talk, Valerie Chan reflects on being a model minority raised by a demanding tiger mom striving for perfection to meet high expectations. When a major mistake occurs during a house remodel, she confronts her inner critic and learns the value of vulnerability and seeking help. This leads to a realization that true perfection lies in embracing your authentic self, bringing newfound freedom and self-acceptance. Again, with her Speak Talk, Tiger Parenting Helped Me Overcome the Shame of Real Estate Fraud, here's published speaker Valerie Chan.
If you look at me from a distance, I'm what you consider the model minority. Intelligent, industrious, hardworking, and fully in charge of my life. In fact, I rarely ask for help because I'm competent in most things that I do, and I'm modest too. I act appropriately in all circumstances. If the occasion stands for laughter, I laugh appropriately, not too loud, not too soft, or if the occasion stands for solemnness, say at a funeral or a staff meeting, I make sure my demeanor matches the atmosphere where I'm at. I smile and nod and always try to agree. I try to never disagree. I strive to be that perfect model minority. That is because I'm the proud product of a tiger mom. For those who are unfamiliar with tiger parenting, think about being at the top of your game. Maybe you're the violinist at the Boston Symphony, or the valedictorian at your high school, or that heart surgeon pursuing their first open heart surgery, and your mother finds that one flaw she believes would make all the difference in the world. For the violinist, it's that one note. For the valedictorian, that A-. For the heart surgeon, it's that one suture that could have been just perfect. And your mother points it out to you, even though you've outperformed more than 99% of the population, and she amplifies it to your aunties and uncles in the entire Asian American community. That's the epitome of a tiger mom. It's that soul-crushing experience that led me to perform that much more in my rigorous schedule of activities growing up. AP classes, honor roll, learning 4 instruments, violin, viola, guitar, and flute, being second chair in the California Youth Symphony, and running cross country and track and field. I had to be that perfect tiger cub. Shame and guilt ran me to perform that much more so that I wouldn't disappoint my mom and my family and the entire Asian American race. While this soul-crushing, nitpicking criticism of parenting may seem a little bit harsh, I knew that my parents loved me and were preparing me to be a functioning member of society, and that I would enjoy commercial success as well as financial stability. The flaw in this parenting style, however, is that even though I look perfect from afar, I'm highly self-critical, always correcting myself to look better from the outside. I'm judgmental, and that always runs my life. And admitting any sort of weakness, any flaw or mistake, disappoints my family. As you can imagine, growing up, being tiger parenting doesn't leave many room for mistakes. So throughout my life, I tried to limit my mistakes. Or if I made a small mistake, or I wrapped it in something worthwhile to pay attention to. For example, when I got divorced, I built a house. I sold a business and successfully transitioned to a legal career. The standard divorce wrapped in a cornucopia of accomplishments. This silenced the wagging tongues of my family and that inner critic of mine that was primarily the voice of my mother criticizing me that I was now flawed. That inner critic, however, couldn't be silenced when I made one of the largest mistakes of my life. One that couldn't be covered up or wrapped in a bow. I was in the midst of a remodeling project. I had just torn down my house and given half of my money to my contractor with the expectation that the contractor was going to build my house. The contractor, however, had other plans and never showed up. I was stranded during the building process. Not only did I have to find money to pay for the funds that I had given the contractor, I had to find contractors to start and finish my house. And COVID had just begun. To give you how dire the situation was, I couldn't access my lines of credit because banks weren't lending money at the time. I couldn't get a real estate loan because I had just bulldozed my house and nothing stood in its place. I had limited funds to start and complete my house. To boot, I was living on a friend's couch. Waves of shame overcame me when I realized that I was making one of the largest mistakes of my life. I was ashamed that I had chosen this contractor to do my house. I was ashamed that I was giving my contractor all that money. I was ashamed that I didn't know if I was going to have enough money to complete the project. I was ashamed that I had no builders to work with at this time. I was ashamed that I was living on a friend's couch. For weeks, that inner critic, and the shame of what I had done overwhelmed me that I was lying flat on the couch. How can I be this perfect tiger parented cub and this perfect model minority, especially now? What do people think of me? For me to build my house and overcome what had happened, I had to overcome my parenting, tiger parenting. I had to overcome the fear of not knowing what to do. I had to overcome the fear of asking people for help. I had to overcome the image of being not perfect. While I was a victim of fraud, I didn't have to be the victim of the inner critic running me or these circumstances. My tiger mom demanded more from me. She demanded resourcefulness. She demanded that I find my inner resiliency and to find that inner strength of my tiger cub, even if I didn't have it. The voices of that inner critic and that inner resiliency wrestled, and eventually that inner resiliency won. In the end, it wasn't pretty or perfect. Through many tears and many calls, I found contractors and builders who were willing to work with me. They structured payment plans so that I could work with them and pay them appropriately. I worked with my banker to find pockets of money I didn't even know I had. And I sold a house, one of my only houses, to pay for the cost overruns that were associated with my project. I didn't hear from my tiger parents during this time because they were too shocked that I had done something like this. And after 2 years, in the fall of 2021, I finally moved into my house. The journey of this mistake taught me that I didn't have to be that model minority that people expected of me. My mom didn't expect it, my relatives didn't expect it. And if I could release the image of who I was supposed to be, how I was supposed to act, and the quest to be perfect, I could just be myself. Messy, not having all the answers, just me. And I could be free if I wanted to of the inner critic and the shame and guilt that I learned from my tiger parenting. And for me, that was perfect. Thank you.
That was Valerie Chan with her Speak Talk. Tiger Parenting helped me overcome the shame of real estate fraud. In the show notes today, you will see a link to a GoFundMe that has been put up to help aid Valerie as she moves through this difficult time while her friends help her to rebuild. So please consider donating to the GoFundMe linked in the show notes. Our next speaker is Dr. Dale Coffin-Astar with her Speak Talk Finding the Advocate Within from Speak Neurodiversity, which took place in Port Washington, New York on November 15th, 2023. Now, I was lucky enough to be one of the producers on this particular event, and it was co-produced by the Nicholas Center, which is an incredible organization, and we will link them in the show notes as well. Dr. Dale Coffin-Astar takes us on a journey of her son's autism diagnosis and how it has developed her advocacy skills while creating a deeper understanding of the road it took to get here. With her Speak Talk Finding the Advocate Within, here's Dr. Dale Coffin-Astar.
How could I let Tinky Winky, Dipsy, Lala, and Poe get the best of me? It was 1998. And I knew that those darn Teletubbies were up to no good. Children everywhere were mesmerized by them, including my own. They were the only non-speaking characters on television at that time. My son was 9 months old, and he was the most delicious thing on earth. He had chubby cheeks, dimples, a great smile. He was even saying a few words by then. Mama, Dada, thank you. Bye-bye. And everything was great until it wasn't. By December of that year, I knew that something was not right. I knew that something was off. But how could it be? Was what I was seeing real? My son began to do more and more things that I did not want to see or hear. He looked like a Teletubby in person, running around in circles, speaking in his own language, flapping his hands, becoming less and less engaged. The child that I knew a week ago was no longer there. It was difficult. I had an ache in my heart and a pit in the bottom of my stomach. My son became my personal OT project. As a professor of occupational therapy who specialized in pediatrics and has worked with children throughout the lifespan, I knew that I had seen this before. I knew that I had to do any and everything to help him overcome this. But why was everything so difficult? Why was everything such a challenge? Nothing was easy, and I thought that I had a good handle on things, but I was wrong. I remember sitting through his early intervention evaluations and being told he didn't qualify for an OT evaluation. I went home thinking, maybe this is a good thing, because maybe he's not as delayed as I thought. I had the same knot in my stomach all night, and I woke up the next morning, contacted the service coordinator, and demanded an OT evaluation. Her reply was that the county doesn't allow OT evaluations on children that young. And I said to her, I'm prepared to appeal this any and every way. So she said, I'll see what I can do. And so it began, a vicious circle of immediate denials, followed by my threats, and then eventually getting what I wanted. Everything was such a challenge. And then came high school. He could graduate at age 21 and become the typical autism label by graduating onto my couch. The school felt that they had great alternatives for me. Vocab, dayhab, rehab, anyhab, none of which I was interested in. I begged them to try alternative points of care, in which they did listen. Everything was such a struggle. I distinctly remember the high school put out an open ad for a summer job. They were hiring janitorial assistants at that time, maybe about 10 to 15 boys. Chris came home so excited because for the first time he could be like everyone else. We prepared for his interview, prepped him with questions. That morning he ran out the house so excited, his tie crooked, wearing a suit jacket because it was very important to make a great impression. He came home that day in tears. My heart sank once again because he wasn't hired. I contacted the school to inquire further what happened, and they said to me there were some concerns about him being around hazardous materials and chemicals. So I questioned further and said, well, wouldn't he be supervised? I was met with empty responses, so I dug further and contacted the school district and the principal. As you could tell by now, I asked way too many questions. I was met with 3 days of silence. No one responded. Each and every day I checked my email very anxiously. Finally, they said to me, we'll hire him, but we can't pay him. The district is tapped right now. We hired all of the boys that we can, but he can work and get the experience. What I really wanted them to understand is that for my kid, being a janitor's assistant could be his life's work, but they didn't get it. The impact of my son's autism diagnosis has profoundly impacted my life in numerous ways. Initially, it was met with a sense of loss and grief and extreme sadness. However, it soon opened my eyes to a different side of love and patience and a deeper understanding of the human spirit. At this time, I met with a young man who's 25 years old and appears normal in many senses. He works 3 days a week at Home Depot. He attends ballet class twice weekly in New York City. He takes the train. He's such an easy, happy, go-lucky kid. We watch as his high school friends now are finishing college and post-professional programs. Some are teachers, accountants, doctors. He clings to those memories and relationships as they become further and further distant. He stalks them on Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Snapchat, and gets in trouble for it. It's all too overwhelming. The things that keep me up at night is his existence without me in it. How will he manage his life, his needs, his care, Medicaid, Medicare, SSI, SSD, SNAP, EBT? It is all so overwhelming. As I look out to my new class of occupational therapy students and I put on my clinical hat and educate them on the needs of the neurodiverse population, I stress to them the importance of advocacy and the importance of standing by your clients. That has become my life's work. I heard from a student that graduated about 7 years ago, most recently. She called to inform me that she had resigned her position at the Department of Education and started her own company called Spectrum Lingo. I was floored to really understand the power that I have from the classroom. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that life doesn't end at the diagnosis, that things will get better, and that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. This is a hard road. It is difficult, it is challenging, and it is emotional. But at the same time, it fills you with a sense of gratitude and love that I cannot explain, to truly understand how resilient the human spirit is and the abilities and strengths of individuals of the neurodiverse population. Life is a dance. Sometimes you lead, sometimes you follow, but you learn as you go. Thank you.
That was Dr. Dale Coffin A-Star with her talk, Finding the Advocate Within. What an incredible talk. How lovely it was to work with Dr. Dale. She was an incredible human being. She is an incredible human being. And we were so lucky to have her on the stage of the Gene Rimsky Theater in Port Washington on November 15th of 2023. Our final talk for today's episode comes from legendary news anchor Carol Silva. Carol is a friend of mine. I met her years and years ago. I happened to work with her on a talk that she did for our previous platform. And this is an interesting story. The beauty of Speak and how we do not put our speakers and their talks in a box is showcased here in this talk tremendously. Now, Carol did a talk on another platform that was restrained and confined by rules. Now, we have rules on the Speak platform, but we allow our speakers to be much freer than some of the other platforms out there. Although Carol did an incredible job on that previous talk, I felt that we had confined her a little bit too much with the restraints around the concept of faith. And so when the opportunity came for Carol to do a talk here, I asked her to do a similar talk to the first one, but this time without the restraints, this time without the box. Do what you do and say what you want to say. And this talk was so incredible. The day someone is diagnosed with cancer can be terrifying. The day someone is told they have cancer and it's already spread can be downright paralyzing. But when Carol Silva was told you have stage 4 cancer, a golf ball-sized tumor in your lung has spread to 12 more in your brain, she simply responded, "Thank you, God, for my healing." This is the story of the life that led Emmy Award-winning anchorwoman Carol Silva to her ultimate expression of faith. We loved this talk so much, and we loved this event so much. Speak Faith was an incredible event. I'll talk about it a little bit after her talk. Without further ado, here's Carol Silva with Faith Showed Up Just When I Needed It Most.
I'm in second grade, but I look like a little bride. I'm all dressed in white. I've got a white fingertip-length veil on. I've got a white dress with puffy sleeves, and the dress poofs out a little bit because there are petticoats under it, white anklets, and brand new white patent leather shoes. It's my first Holy Communion. I love this day. I remember that outfit, even though it's borrowed from my cousin. But those shoes are mine. I don't remember much about the sacrament of communion, though. I don't remember the taste of the host as Jesus enters me and is about to fortify my soul forever. I don't remember much except being among hundreds of second graders, 7-year-olds, reverently walking into a small church, Holy Family Parish in Hicksville. We're walking in, and you have to imagine 200, 300, 400 kids, that's a lot for the nuns to control. But the nun in charge, she has her ways. Sister Petronella is off the boat from Ireland, and she brought with her a trinity of techniques. The first technique, she could bore a hole in your soul with her blue eyes. The next technique, it's kind of a half lean, a half step in. She leans over and she looks at you closely, and her hands are behind her back, and you're really hoping the big kids are lying when they say she may have a ruler back there. The third technique is she raises the pitch and the volume of that Gaelic voice. Well, on that day, in that church, one little 7-year-old girl does something so egregious that Sister Petronella explodes. That little girl starts to cry, and that triggers a river of tears through the church. I also remember this, that borrowed or not, I love that get-up so much I couldn't wait to get home and run down the block and show all of my friends. But on the way down the street, I tripped over a piece of concrete in the sidewalk that was broken, and that ripped the sole right off the bottom of my white patent leather shoes. Now, my mother was a great woman. She was understanding, she was patient, but she was also raised with, I guess, what you'd call refinement. And in her mind, I would not be doing the next day follow through. The next day is the Sunday when all the kids come back to church again, dressed up like little communicants to receive their second Holy Communion. Well, apparently the black patent leather shoes that I had did not go with that white dress, and so I wasn't participating. I was devastated. The next year, the phone rings. My brothers and I are off the waiting list. We're leaving public school. We're going to the Catholic school there. Now, a couple of things change. We're going to wear a uniform every day. We're also going to be sitting in classrooms with 49 other kids at the very least. But besides that, things were pretty normal. We were going to go to church every Sunday on holy days, confession at the very least, once a month, because our mother did. It's not just that she said it, but she showed us. She says, this is what Catholics do. This is what Catholic families do. And so we're going not because we want to leave cartoons on a Sunday morning, not because we're thinking about getting closer to God. We're going because that is what we do. We go to church, we go through Catholic school, and I'm in 8th grade. And now it's obvious I should be applying to Catholic high schools. And so I do. And I know that I'm a shoo-in because I've won the 8th grade General Excellence Award. My brother's asking me, how'd you do that? And I say, listen, I just never got caught. Well, I'm accepted to the new high school that's just 5 houses from where we live, Holy Trinity High School. And I walk there with my brother. I walk there every day with him, and I'm starting to walk into a relationship with God. Now, some of the credit has to go to my 9th grade religion teacher. John Ahern was young, he had long hair, he was good-looking, and he was a hippie. We held religion class sitting on the ground together, and he said, while pointing to this oak tag poster taped to his desk, in this class there will be no cursing, but if you're really frustrated, you can say this, framp. I go through 9th grade, and I'm starting to actually have conversations with God, 9th grade, 10th grade, but a lot of them are definitely based on teenage angst. I get to 12th grade, and it's time to apply to college, and I get accepted to a Catholic college, but my parents say, hey, we don't have the money for that. So now I'm walking into 4 years of secular college. I go through, I graduate, and it's a warm June night after college graduation when I run into a college friend in the parking lot of a bar where I'm going to meet friends. I say, Robbie, how are you? What have you been doing? He says, I'm reading my Bible. What about you? And I said very reluctantly, I'm reading my Bible too? Robbie becomes a lifelong friend. I go home and I meet his mom, and his mom is Nana Rita. She becomes my second mentor. I start to get involved now in my 20s in starting a Christian coffee house, going to prayer meetings, charismatic masses. But God is only a part of my life because I'm doing those things sometimes, not all the time. God doesn't have a starring role. Then I get to my 30s. I meet a great guy. We're getting married, and we're telling everybody that God is our third and not-so-silent partner. We have babies. There's no doubt that these children are going to be baptized. There's no doubt that they're going to Catholic school. Well, no doubt in my mind that they're going to Catholic school. My husband is a public school kid. He needs a little convincing, and I have just what he needs. I take him to meet Sister Connie. Sister Connie is the legendary Montessori-trained pre-K teacher who teaches the little 3- and 4-year-olds how to love learning, but also how to love God. My husband's sold. As the kids start to go through elementary and high school, we start teaching pre-Cana. It's a marriage prep class for couples getting married in the Catholic Church. We teach it for 22 years, and now people are starting to ask me, where is this faith coming from? And my answer is, it's pretty simple. We all want to belong to something bigger. We all want to find a place where there's peace and where we have purpose. And for me, for us, that's really the church. And so we go on and teach, and our kids grow. And our daughter Connor is now in 12th grade, and she comes home from her Catholic high school in her comparative religion class and says, hey, guess what? I figured out my faith. Oh, really? What is it, honey? It's Connorism. I said, Connor, you're a teenager. Your religion has been Connorism for years. But then God blesses me. She goes off to the University of Maryland. She meets an amazing guy. They date a number of years. They get engaged. This guy is a graduate from the best all-boys Catholic high school in Baltimore. And they're getting married April 18th, 2020. And it's going to be a church wedding. But during the planning, 7 months before that, suddenly I have a doctor's appointment. I have a new doctor who's figured out the reason for my cough for the past 2 years. I show up at that office of Dr. Naga Sitharamu with my husband on one side and my great friend Kathy on the other side. Kathy is also a nurse, so that's a bonus round. Dr. Sitharamu is tiny, and she walks in the room, looks at us, and says, you have stage 4 cancer. You have a golf ball-sized tumor in your lung, and it's spread to 12 more tumors in your brain. And with that, the room goes silent. Until we hear, thank you, God, for my healing. We all looked around, surprised. Nobody more surprised than me. That began an almost 5-year journey. 4 rounds of cancer, brain radiation, lung radiation, surgeries, all the after effects of the drugs. But I go into every one of those chapters with peace, with a smile. And now I've got this growing team of doctors, and they diagnosed me with a terminal case of hope, of optimism. And I never really thought about where that optimism came from until recently. I'm only telling you this next part because you really need to have some perspective. Now, I go to Mass every day like my mom used to. But I've only been doing it for a year. I was not doing it 5 years ago. And I don't go to Mass because I'm a survivor who's actually looking for a way to win at whack-a-mole. No, I go to Mass because I'm retired. I have time. And honestly, it is the best way to start my day. So at a recent Mass, our pastor, Father Tom, said, this is one of my favorite days. He was going into the classroom of the second graders who were going to receive communion, and he asks them every year, what's your favorite baseball team? And half the kids are yelling Yankees, and the other half are yelling Mets. Hey, it's New York, you know? And Father Tom says, these kids don't have a favorite team because they've figured it out. Their parents have figured it out. These kids have a favorite team because kids do what their parents do. Kids show up for where their parents show up. And I thought about that for a while. I thought that I show up looking for faith because my mother showed up looking for faith. I showed up looking for faith because my mother was the one who went to church. Well, September 26, 2019, when I showed up in Dr. Sita Ramu's office, the great news is faith was right alongside me. Faith was right there. And so I continued planning to show up for a very, very long time. In fact, I plan to show up for so long that I am planning my 95th birthday party. Mariachis and all. And I want you to know you're all invited, but please just show up. Thank you.
That was Carol Silva with Faith Showed Up Just When I Needed It Most. What an incredible talk that was. Speak Faith for us was a really important event. There were other platforms out there that are ruled by limiting content around politics, around science, and around religion. And so walking that fine line between religion and faith was an interesting thing, and we wanted to be able to allow speakers to speak about religion, speak about faith in a way that was not preachy, in a way that was not selling them on religion, but without putting restraints on their talks. Carol did an incredible job of doing that and showcasing how powerful the Speak platform can be when we use our voices and step up to the microphone and into the spotlight. Thank you, Carol, for everything that you bring to us every single day, for your courage, for your faith, and for your voice. That does it for another episode of the Speak Podcast. Join us next week and every week as we bring you 3 talks every week. Thanks for joining, guys. We'll see you next time.
The Speak Podcast is brought to you by Launchpad 516 Studios. Executive produced by Fred P. Banning,
Jason Martin,
and George Andriopoulos. Our theme song, Champions Day, is by Lupus Nocti. Incidental music, Melting Places, is by Andres Cantu. Music and sound effects licensed through Epidemic Sound. The Speak Podcast is hosted with Podbean.
Make sure to subscribe to this feed wherever podcasts are available and leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts while you're at it. Follow Speak at Speak_event on Twitter and at Speak Event on all other social media platforms.
Visit our website, speakevent.com, for upcoming events, channel partner, sponsorship, and Speak at Work opportunities.
And follow all the great podcasts produced by Launchpad 516 Studios.